He framed her for murder, not because she was guilty, but because she loved him enough to take the blame. Laura Devon had built his empire with her bare hands and her blind faith. She signed the papers he handed her without reading. She smiled through the press when he said, "My fiancé will handle the legal side." And when the police came for her, it was his eyes she looked for, not to accuse, but to be saved. He never looked back. 3 years. That's how long it took the world to forget her. But she didn't die in that prison fire, not really. She was reborn in its ashes, with a new name, a new face, and no mercy left. And when fate turned the tables, when he became her employee, she smiled. Because this time, she'd write the ending herself. Before the scandal, Laura Devon's world glittered. She was the kind of woman people admired, brilliant yet kind, the quiet storm behind Marrow Industries' success. The press called her the heart of the company. The board called her indispensable. Julian Vance called her his future. He was everything she thought she wanted: charismatic, confident, endlessly ambitious. Together, they built dreams on marble floors, whispered strategy between kisses, planned a wedding wrapped in gold and power. When he asked her to sign a few contracts for the upcoming merger, she didn't hesitate. He said it would secure their future. She smiled and signed. Days later, everything shattered. The CEO of the partner firm was found dead, poisoned. The documents pointed to Laura's signature authorizing a deal that funneled money through offshore accounts. The poison, traced to her wine glass, sealed her fate. The headlines screamed betrayal. Julian Vance's fiancé accused of murder. Cameras flashed. The same cameras that once celebrated her now hunted her. Reporters shouted her name like it was a curse. Julian stood beside her only once for the cameras. His smile was calm, rehearsed. "Laura's innocent," he said, his arm around her trembling shoulders. "She'll clear this up." Then he disappeared. At trial, every document, every witness, every number pointed to her. Every truth she tried to speak drowned beneath forged evidence and silence. And when the verdict fell guilty, she looked for him in the crowd. For his face, his eyes, his love. He wasn't there. In the cold cell that night, she replayed every promise, every touch, every "I love you" that had been a lie. Outside, the world called her a murderer. Inside, she became something worse: forgotten. And when the prison riot came, and the fire roared through the halls, Laura didn't scream. She let the flames take everything: her name, her pain, her heart. Because what was left to save? When the fire finally died, the world believed Laura Devon had perished in it. The news called it a tragedy that closed a scandal. But beneath the ashes, a pulse still beat. A journalist named Rowan found her barely breathing near the prison ruins, face burned, identity unrecognizable. He should have turned her in. Instead, he took her to a remote cabin by the cliffs and nursed her back to life. "You've been destroyed," he said softly, "but destruction is just the start of creation." "You've been destroyed," he said softly, "but destruction is just the start of creation." For months, she hovered between life and shadow. Pain was constant in her skin, her bones, her memories. But as the wounds healed, something else grew in their place: clarity. Laura Devon was gone. Mara Sloan was born. New name, new face, new soul stitched together by rage, reason, and resolve. She learned the world again, but this time as a hunter, not a dreamer. Rowan taught her how to vanish, how to read contracts, follow money trails, manipulate corporate veils. She studied law and business under aliases, moving like a ghost through the systems that once destroyed her. At night, she practiced control, her new form of vengeance. No tears, no trembling, just quiet, perfect composure. She learned how power really worked, how men like Julian thrived on worship, how love had been her only flaw. By the third year, she had rebuilt herself: mind sharper, gaze colder, voice smoother than silk and steel combined. She could walk into any room and command silence. Then came the offer. An international firm contacted her about a failing corporation, Vance Global Holdings, Julian's empire. The irony was poetic. They wanted her to save it. Mara closed the laptop slowly, her reflection flickering in the dark screen. Fate had handed her the knife, And this time, she would choose where to cut. She woke up in a hospital 3 towns away, wrapped in bandages, wrapped in someone else's mercy. A stranger, an old journalist, had found her barely alive near the wreckage. He knew her face from the trial, but instead of reporting her, he hid her. "You've been burned once," he said softly. "Don't let them burn your future too." Alara became Mara Sloan. New ID, new degree, new scars that looked like maps, reminders of where she'd been and where she'd go. She learned law, finance, technology, strategy. She devoured books, dismantled companies, studied power like anatomy. 3 years later, she wasn't just alive, she was lethal in silence. Mara didn't wear her pain. She wore control. She walked differently now, no hesitation, no softness. Her eyes held the kind of calm that scared people before they even knew why. When she looked in the mirror, she didn't see a victim. She saw the woman Julian Vance had created and the one who would destroy him. Then came the call. A headhunting firm reached out. "We were seeking a CEO for a restructuring deal at Vance Global Holdings." Julian's company. The one he stole from her hands. Mara smiled. "Tell them I accept." Because fate, apparently, had excellent timing. The first day back at Vance Global felt like walking into a dream she'd already burned. The marble floors gleamed the same. The gold V logo still caught the morning light. But everything felt smaller now because she wasn't the girl who used to worship it. Mara Sloan, they introduced her. Interim CEO. Julian didn't recognize her at first. He looked tired, worn down, the empire she once built now drowning in lawsuits and debt. When he shook her hand, his fingers trembled slightly. "Welcome aboard." Her smile was polite, sharp. "I look forward to cleaning up your mess." He laughed, a touch too soft. "You remind me of someone I used to know." "I get that a lot," she said. And so began the quiet game. Mara studied him in meetings, noting every flinch, every lie. She rebuilt the company piece by piece, undoing the rot he'd left. She praised him just enough to keep him close and gave him just enough rope to hang himself. She planted truth where lies had grown. She gathered allies, not with promises, but with fairness. People whispered her name with respect, not fear. Julian, meanwhile, began to unravel. The board trusted her. Investors flocked to her. And every time he tried to sabotage her decisions, she countered with grace so precise it felt surgical. It wasn't revenge yet. It was patience, the kind that tasted like power. It came quietly, the way storms do before they break. Julian walked into her office one evening, eyes dark, voice shaking. "Who are you, Mara? How do you know every move I'm going to make?" She looked up from her laptop, calm. "Maybe I learned from the best." Then she slid a file across the desk. Inside, copies of the old merger papers, signatures, bank transfers, the hidden accounts that had funded his escape, all traced back to him. His face drained of color. "You," she stood. "You framed a woman who loved you for a crime you committed. You burned her reputation, her life, her name." Julian staggered back. "Alara." The name hit the air like thunder. She met his eyes. "She's gone." He dropped to his knees, whispering apologies she'd waited years to hear. But revenge wasn't the scream she'd imagined. It wasn't fire or fury. It was silence, the quiet power of truth setting itself free. She didn't press charges herself. She let the evidence go public. Let justice do what love couldn't. Julian was arrested within the week. At the press conference, when reporters asked who she really was, Mara smiled softly. "Just someone who believes in second chances," she said. And for the first time in years, she meant it. The months that followed were strange, like watching spring grow through the ashes of winter. The company thrived. The employees, once afraid, now spoke openly, laughed in hallways. Mara walked the same corridors where Alara once wept and felt nothing but peace. She visited the journalist who'd saved her. He was older now, but his eyes still kind. "You did what most people only dream of," he said. "You took your pain and turned it into purpose." Mara smiled. "No," she whispered. "I just stopped letting it own me." One evening, she stood on the rooftop, the city lights below flickering like memories. A quiet voice broke the air, a new employee, kind, gentle, curious. He didn't know her past. He only saw the woman she'd become. They spoke for hours about life, about loss, about starting over. And when he smiled at her, not as a CEO, not as a survivor, but simply as Mara, something inside her softened again. Not love, not yet, but possibility. Because the truest revenge, she realized, wasn't destroying what hurt you. It was outliving it beautifully. They called her a ghost, a rumor, a woman who rose from her own ashes. But the truth was quieter than legend. She didn't come back to haunt. She came back to heal. He framed her for murder, yes. But in doing so, he killed only her weakness. And when she returned unrecognizable, unstoppable, unafraid, the world finally saw what he never did, that you can bury a woman's name, her love, her life, but not her fire, because some souls don't just survive the flame, they become it.